All right. Hi, everybody, and thank you, and welcome back to Stimming in Stilettos. When I tell you that our guest today is somebody you are going to want to know, please believe me. So, our guest today is Miss Stephanie Espy. Um, Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I mean, I feel like it's been a long time coming. I can't, we just keep missing each other. And then we see each other in places and it's like, hey, girl. So,
We haven't seen each other in quite some time because of both,
yeah,
but yeah.
that's true. But I'm really, really happy to have you on the show. I can't even wait for my audience to hear your story. So, as we do on the show, tell us your STEM story.
Sure. So, gosh, it's like, where do I start, right? There's so many, I could go on and on and on about this story, but I guess, when you start a story, I guess you always start from the beginning. So with my beginning, it starts off with my parents and being a young child, growing up in Decatur, Georgia, with my mom and my dad, who were both engineers. And so I'm always curious as to the statistics of how many women in STEM have parents who were also in STEM. I feel like it's very uncommon, um, but that's just part of my story. Both my parents are engineers, as well as lots of aunts and uncles in my family. So I come from a very STEM-oriented family. Not only myself, but some of my siblings, as well as cousins, have also gone into STEM careers. So if you ever came over for an extended family dinner of some sort, Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, you're likely to encounter lots of different scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians all in the same room. And so that's pretty cool that, growing up, that's sort of just kind of who we are. We tend to find, I guess, value, or just see that STEM is all around us, and that was taught to me at an early age. And not only that, but I've always had an affinity towards math and science, and particularly chemistry. And so I chose to pursue a career in chemical engineering. And so if you kind of fast forward through all of my K through 12 schooling and then my decision to major in chemical engineering, that led me to pursue a degree in that area. My undergraduate degree is from MIT, and so I studied there for 4 years. I did lots of internships while I was there, did some research while I was there, and decided that I guess I just wanted more. I decided to go to graduate school, also for chemical engineering. Went to UC Berkeley for grad school, and did a lot more research in graduate school. So I got a chance to study the metabolism of plants that produce natural rubber, and really trying to get some transgenic plants grown in the U.S. so that the U.S. could produce its own, have its own supply of natural rubber instead of having to import rubber from other countries. So that was a really interesting project that I worked on. I was able to publish a couple papers. We could talk, man, every aspect of my story can go in depth for forever about sort of the work and the challenges and the successes and the whole thing. But ultimately, after finishing that, I moved to New York and worked there for a while, completely kind of changing gears a little bit, and ultimately landing, deciding to go back to school yet again for an MBA. And came back to Atlanta for that, went to Emory University, where I earned my MBA and focused in entrepreneurship and marketing. And so then my job was like, how do I combine like my background in chemical engineering with my new degree in business and entrepreneurship and marketing? How do I kind of create something that allows me to touch and use all those different skill sets? And so ultimately I decided to go into STEM education space. And I started two different businesses in that space. One is called Math Sp. Strategies in Problem Solving, which is about 11 years old now. And the other is called STEM Gems, which is about 5 years old now. And so I juggle between parenting a 7-year-old daughter, I juggle both of those businesses, Math SP and STEM Gems, which allow me again to combine my passion for STEM and engineering as well as entrepreneurship. And so I've created this kind of little space that I can kind of wear all these different hats. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Man, I mean, that's a story. Take us back a little bit to what were you doing specifically in New York when you were in New York?
So I have to take you back to California and go to New York. Mm-hmm. So while I was at UC Berkeley, I entered into a PhD program in chemical engineering. It was around my third year there that I started to really feel a little bit uneasy about my experience and my really just lack of support. I did have support from my advisor, who was great, but really more the communal support, and primarily because most of my research was conducted off campus. And so though I was a part of a really important and valuable lab on campus, starting around my second year, I was really doing most of my work off campus because I worked with rubber plants, and my rubber plants were grown at the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. So I was there primarily collecting my samples and doing my experiments. So that took me off campus. And then I found myself rarely going to campus, which really resulted in a kind of a disconnect between me as a graduate student working for the government in this space and the other students on campus and my advisors. So I started seeing them less and less and started feeling kind of like this wedge being formed. And then I was at the same time taking classes at the business school at Berkeley, the Haas Business School, which is I was a part of this program that was a joint program between the engineering school and the business school called the Management Technology Program. So it allowed engineering students to take classes in the business school. It allowed business students to take classes in the engineering school. So we got a chance to kind of cross-register. And that kind of opened my eyes up to this world of business. And so I found myself really struggling in the end of my second year time frame, where I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do ultimately? Do I want to complete this PhD and spend the next 3 years working on my research? Do I want to, I was really intrigued by the MLT program I was in. Do I want to kind of go more into the technology business route and pursue an MBA? Do I want to be a professor one day? If so, perhaps, that was another line. Do I want to go into industry? My brother at the time was on Wall Street in New York. And so he was like, come to Wall Street. This is when Wall Street was like the thing to do. Mm-hmm. And he was enjoying every second being there. So he was like influenced me in that direction. My aunt, who's a professor of electrical engineering, was influenced me down the professorship route. My dad was more pushing me down the MBA, kind of the business engineering route. So I kind of had a lot of influences. And so, so my time in New York, going back to your original question, my time in New York was really me trying to figure out what I wanted, how I wanted to combine all these different things. And so I got a chance to do something completely unrelated, kind of tapping into my other talents that I have. And I did some really cool non-engineering, non-STEM related work in New York. Nice. And also took the time to figure out like what I wanted my next step to be. And so that was really a self-guided time. And I dibbled and dabbled in a lot of different things while I was there. And then ultimately I decided to go the MBA route. And so that's why after New York, I went to business school. I gotta tell you, I admire that. I admire just the gumption to just do something that was just for yourself so you could figure it out. I think for myself, it took longer than it took me a long time to figure it out. But that's okay. I think that sometimes as women or people of color or just people in general, I think sometimes we don't allow ourselves time to figure things out, to breathe, and you kind of rush into things, and that's kind of what I felt like I was doing. And so I just needed a little bit of a breather. And I had been on full speed, you know, my entire life essentially, and I kind of needed some time. And also, just to be very honest, I wanted to pursue some other interests. And so I knew that I had a plan, so to speak, and I felt like, you know, at that particular age, I knew that if I didn't pursue other interests at that point, when would I ever have the opportunity to do, you know, because I was on this path, this kind of fast track path to, you know, some career, and I hadn't really taken time to smell the roses, so to speak, to kind of
to live a little,
pursue other things. So this was my opportunity to do those things, and that's exactly what I did. Yeah.
You know what I enjoy the most about this story, or what we're talking about right now, is I think people think because we're engineers and we have this STEM background that we are, you know, the whole nerd moniker is like they're always talking about. I think about Big Bang Theory a lot, and people are like, yeah, that's what I think of when I think of, you know, people who are in STEM, because they, you know, they sort of lived and ate and breathed all of their stuff. And what this story says to me is that we're multifaceted individuals with a diverse array of talents in many other areas other than STEM. So I think that this is really healthy.
Absolutely. And I feel that, you know, it's sometimes really hard to balance all of the things that you're interested in. It's hard to like figure out, you know, how do I do this, but also do that, and also do this, and also be that, and also do this is really challenging to do it all and do it all well.
Right.
And so, but if you don't do it, then you find yourself unhappy, or you find yourself, you know, in a space that you never really saw yourself getting to. And I think that one of the biggest things I try to live my life without regrets. I don't want to be, you know, back then I was, of course, early 20s. I didn't want to look back on that part of my life and say, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have taken this opportunity. I think it was a time in my life that I was like, you give yourself permission to do whatever it is your heart desires, right? And if you don't do that, you're going to, you know, move on and get into a career and then have this uneasy feeling of like, man, I wish I would have at least tried, or I wonder what would have happened, or, you know, those kind of thoughts. And that's something that I just could not stand to go through life wishing I had tried something different. So the truth of the matter is I went to New York and I interviewed for, you know, all those Wall Street jobs my brother told me about, and I explored lots of different paths because I wasn't sure which path I would take. And then I had so many offers that were so enticing. You know, I was like, oh my God, like, you know, like all this money doing this or this or this. I was literally pulled in like so many directions. I just kind of felt like, okay, I got to really figure this out before I find myself going down the path just because someone told me it was the best thing to do. And also what ended up being the best thing, you know, for what may have been best to somebody else may not have been best for me.
Right. And that's the hard but simple truth. I mean, we have one life to live, and it's up to us to figure it out, right? Why we were placed here, what is our purpose, and what does that look like? How does that manifest itself in an everyday thing, you know, everyday profession? What am I doing? What am I pursuing? And why am I doing it? Those are really the hard questions that we wake up and try to answer every day.
Right. But when you find that thing, like when you actually do figure it out, or at least you think you have it figured out, it's such a good feeling, you know, to know like, you know, like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, I feel like I'm where I'm meant to be. I feel like my experiences have led me to this moment. And so I do kind of always fall back on that. It's like my path was my path, and I may have taken some twists and turns along the way, but ultimately I ended up where I believe I'm supposed to be. And so that, in all of those experiences I've had, because I've lived overseas for a while. I moved to England. I lived in England for a while. I got to travel a little bit over there. All these different things and decisions I've made ultimately play into who I am today, and also have led me to what I even do professionally today. So, and I pull from all those different experiences in what I do today as well. So I think that's also really important, that you allow yourself to do things that maybe don't seem necessarily to make sense to a lot of people at the time, or maybe not even make sense to you. I mean, lots of people were like, what are you doing? You should be doing this and not that, or should be doing that and not this. And it's like, okay, let me figure it out, right? Let me figure it out. Right. And so that's, you got to give yourself the space to do that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the long and the short of it. Like, I mean, our life is ours. We have to have. I'd like to say that when we get to heaven, I'd really like for that box of regrets, or to be empty.
Yeah.
And so all of the choices that you made, you own them, you embrace them, you learn the lessons from them, and you keep it moving. And if you are honored and gifted enough to be living in your purpose, man, there's nothing better than that. You wake up fulfilled every day. Like, you're not searching for whatever that thing is, because that you're walking in it. So which leads me to STEM Gems and Math SP. So how did those come to be?
So again, it was one of those really trying to figure, okay, now I'm adding on this whole other skill set. Like, what do I want to do? I knew that I made the decision to go to business school and to add that skill set to my engineering skill set. But then I was like, how do I combine them both? Like, how do I take all together? So I actually sat down with a career coach, and I remember the career coach drawing a Venn diagram. It was a Venn diagram with 3 overlapping circles. And so one circle represented my passion, one circle represented my interests, and one circle represented my my talent. So it was like passion, interest, and talent. And so we were trying to figure out what overlaps all 3 circles, like what's right in the middle, where you have a passion, you have interest, and then you also there's a need as well. That probably was a part of the conversation. Maybe it was a part of the Venn diagram as well. It's like, okay, what overlaps all of these different things? And so ultimately, what overlapped them all was STEM education. Because I always had an interest in education, because my mother, she was not only a chemical engineer working in the environmental space, she also had a math degree and was an educator, kind of part-time. And so I used to always watch her work with different students. Growing up, I couldn't have been any more than 7 or 8. And when I would see kids come over, and when I say kids, I mean they were older than I was. So they were more, bigger kids come over to our house on the weekends, and she would sit down with them at the kitchen table, and she would help them understand math. And they were doing some really, some things that I had no idea what they were at the time. So I remember just kind of watching and wanting to know, like, what are they doing, And I watched her do that for years and years and years. And I feel like I'm like my mother in a lot of ways when it comes to that, because similar to her, I always had this like interest in like education and educating others. And so, teaching in some way, maybe not necessarily in the classroom, but my mother's mother was a classroom teacher. And so she probably passed it on to my mother. My mother sort of passed it on to me. So I always had an interest in teaching, education, combine that with STEM and engineering, combine that with entrepreneurship and business. And all that led to starting Math SP, which is a math and science STEM education business that educates, right? That we teach other students how to become more STEM fluent, how to become more proficient in math and science subjects. And so when that sort of idea came to me, it was like, wow, like, yeah, this makes so much sense. Like, I can teach other people what I know. You know, what I know about math, science, what I know about engineering, what I know, like all the different things that I know, like I can help other people to also understand these things. And I can at the same time, because I also had a very interest in bringing and introducing more younger people to STEM careers. I felt that there was a huge gap in my education, starting in college, throughout graduate school, as well as in all my work environments, from my internships to the research that I've done. And I always felt like, you know, of course, you know, this being a woman and being an African-American woman, that you're always a minority wherever you go in this STEM world. You're always a minority. And so I had this interest in helping to close the gender gap and the racial gap. So I started Math SP as a way to help people become more fluent in STEM and math and science, but also to help them understand how cool this stuff is, and how,
right,
if they can understand how cool it is, then maybe we can get more of them deciding to go into a similar space, go into this space. And so it was a combination of, like, again, all these different, like, oh yeah, if I do this, then I can help this, I can do that, I can do this, I can help that. And so it was a nice way to combine, again, all these passions I had into one sort of thing that I could create, and like then figure out, how do I achieve this mission? And I have several different kind of missions. How do I achieve all these different missions? And so that's essentially what I set off to do. And that was 11 years ago.
Well, you've done it. I mean, I think the first time I ever saw you was you were doing something, or Math SP was doing something. And I think I literally said, I mean, full transparency, I think I said, I think I need to know her. Because I mean, we were walking in the same space and sort of doing the same things, just, you know, differently. But they were similar in a lot of ways. And I'm like, I don't know her, and I feel like I need to know her. And so that was my first introduction to it. I think it was either on Facebook or LinkedIn or some event you were doing. And I was like, yeah, I need that. So
that's, I mean, I'm glad you said it, because that's really the cool thing about, you know, being in this education space and connecting with other educators, other STEM educators, other people that have like a similar background and have a similar mission to really bring about change, because of our own personal experiences. We all have this desire to like make it better for the next generation, and to help navigate their path. Because, you know, to be honest, even though I had parents who were in STEM, in terms of my path, I really had no direction in terms of like what path I should take. And I remember, again, all these kind of key decision points, and I was like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Or, you know, I really didn't have clear plans, so to speak. And so it's important for me to make sure that other people, younger people, the next generation, has some idea of a path or a plan. And again, that can of course change, and it will change, but at least you know the options. And so that's why I also like meeting people like you and others in our space that we work in, because there's different ways to tackle a problem, right? And so we're all tackling a very similar problem, but in different ways. And obviously the podcast is a unique way to bring around awareness. And, you know, those who are listening, of course, will be able to learn from other people's stories and then make adjustments to their own, or be able to do something new, or, you know, kind of do something differently. So I think we're all kind of having a way impacting a problem, but in different types of ways.
I think you're absolutely right. So STEM gems, which I love, by the way. So tell me how that came into being.
So working with Math SP, building that business, working with students, both boys and girls, predominantly middle school, high school age students for 5-6 years. What I realized is like something was still missing. Like I'm helping students with the foundation piece. I'm giving them a more solid understanding of math and science. I am assisting them with things they're learning in school. I'm building and strengthening, and all that was great, but there was still like a big piece missing because I still wasn't doing enough to like turn their attention towards a STEM career. You know, we were too much in like knee deep into the content of what they were learning and not enough into like, what can you do if you were to pursue, you know, a career? We didn't have enough, there wasn't enough emphasis on the career piece. It also wasn't enough emphasis on the gender gap. Like the sort of like, I was working with, again, boys and girls. At some point, I felt like I was working with more boys than girls. And so I just really wanted to kind of do something special for girls. And also really have it a more of a career focus. And so the original idea of STEM Gems, really before STEM Gems even existed, like the name, it was like, okay, I really want to write a book, and I really want this book to help girls in particular understand STEM, but also understand careers in STEM, and also be able to put a face, like have a woman that they can like aspire to be, you know, so like, oh wow, you know, I really love what she does. That sounds really interesting and cool. I want to do something similar. And so it really started with like writing this book that features these women and features these careers. So I brainstormed different careers. I had like probably close to 100 careers that I had listed. I was like, okay, that will make a super long book. I don't want it to be like a, you know, like a dictionary. I want it to be a little bit more like not too intimidating, right? So like, all right, that's way too many. So I kind of trimmed it down, settled upon 44. And then I, probably settled upon really about 50 or so. And then I started doing the research of, you know, okay, now I need to find women in these careers. So I started doing a lot of online research, just trying to find a woman who's just doing amazing, amazing things in that career. Did all the interviews and kind of trimmed it down to what ended up being 44 different careers and 44 different stories. From all the interviews came a lot of commonalities. Like you kind of start hearing a lot of the same pieces of advice. And so I stand out chapters in the book. So then I had the 44 stories, but also these chapters that are kind of the common themes that appeared across all the interviews. And those chapters are more kind of action forward. There's a lot of bullet points and action items of things that, you know, that girls can do to pursue a STEM path. And so when the book was all said and done, and I came up with the name STEM Gems, and then the subtitle for the book, then it really was like, okay, now I have this book. How do I get not just girls to read it, but how do I build really in-depth conversations around it? Because it's so much here that has to be unpacked. And it's really hard to unpack something by yourself. It's almost like, if you've ever been a part of a book club for yourself, like I've been in a book club for years, and I meet with different women and we get together and we, you know, read a book ahead of time and have discussions around it. And it's always like, you know, you learn something by hearing other people's perspectives and their like interpretation. So I was like, I really want this to be the kind of book that people sit around in a small group and like discuss like these careers and these stories and the impact and the advice, and just have like some really interesting conversation around it. So the next phase after creating the book was creating that space for girls to come together and have those conversations. And creating that space, I called it a club. And I created guides and discussion guides to go along with the book so that they could get together and use the guides to have really interesting conversation. So again, it's very similar to a traditional book club, but it's targeted around girls and is led by an educator, whether it be a parent, whether it be a teacher, whether it be, you know, a Girl Scout troop leader. Anyone can get a group of girls together and start a club, and then use the guides to help drive the conversation around what they're learning and reading in the book. And that's way more impactful than just someone reading it on their own and not having the conversation or the space to really discuss like what resonates, what doesn't resonate, ask questions, seek information. So it really, I wanted to make it something that was more like you could really change someone's life, right? The book itself was, yes, I believe that it is life changing, but I feel like once you can build a tribe around it, it's even more powerful. So that's how that came about. And then it moved on to, okay, how do I take advantage of social media and really make this more into a movement? And that way, whether you are in STEM or not in STEM, whether you have a daughter or you don't have a daughter, whether you are, early career, mid-career, late career, still in college, no matter where you are, like you could still be a part of the movement. So then it kind of took on another leg, so to speak. So it's sort of like it's been building over the years, but it really just started off with like the idea to write a book to help girls understand different careers in STEM, because I felt like these careers are not being advertised enough. They're not on television. They're, you don't really hear about them a lot. They're not sexy and cool. They're not being advertised in that way. They're more advertised to boys or to a certain type of kid, the nerdy type of kid. They're not being presented in a way that girls will really resonate with. So how do I change that persona and make it fun and cool and interesting and, dynamic? And so that's what I was trying to do with the book, and then with everything else that's come since then.
I feel like you've done it. That's always been the knock on what is done like in career counseling, though there's nothing wrong with it. But I feel like it's geared, especially these types of careers or STEM careers are still being tossed to boys, and girls are still being eschewed, or they've just been talked away from them. And some of these jobs aren't, they're not glamorous, but they shouldn't have to be. They are lucrative, they are needed, they make a difference in the world. And I think that that's the bigger picture that we should be telling. And there's another thing about being able to see yourself in through the eyes of someone else. So if someone else is already, and you and I both know that there are a multitude of minority African American women who've walked the path before us, whose stories we don't know. And in particular for me, minority women, Black women, because that's who I am. These girls don't get that story. They don't get that story.
Well, and I also think, to add on to that, I feel like when you think about the really successful women of color, Black women, the women like Oprah Winfrey, or even more recently Kamala Harris, and big named. It's not that many, right? But even the ones that we do know, we need more women like Mae Jemison. Like, she, of course, is a really great example of a woman in STEM that's Black. And I think she does still represent sort of what's possible. But we need kind of more. She's one, but it's hard to like follow up with after May. It's like, okay, who else? And because because her fame was so many years ago, and she's not currently in the spotlight, it's sort of like we almost forget about her in some ways. And we only see the Beyoncés of the world. We see them on the television screen all the time, in the media, on our social media outlets. And so these are the role models, and they're fantastic role models. Michelle Obama, we love all of them, but we don't have an equivalent of a woman in STEM today, who's a Black woman who's really there to say, no, choose this path. We have Serena, we have lots of different careers being represented, from tennis to politics, right? So we have media moguls like Oprah. But we don't have the same when it comes to STEM. We don't have that woman who's like
the rock star
all the time, the rock star we're seeing every day in day, who's really driving young girls to go down this path. We have Katherine Johnson, who, of course, Hidden Figures, who we all know now, but again, she's now deceased. She's not as prominent. Her name is known, but it's not like every day or every week name that we're seeing all the time. So we need someone like that that's going to constantly be, shine the light on STEM. And I think that's why, when it comes time to choose a career, you're choosing more well-known careers, the ones that you're hearing more, you're seeing more, you're more familiar with. And you may know who Mae Jemison is, you may know who Katherine Johnson is, you may have seen the Hidden Figures movie. Yes, you've done those things, but you may even have read the STEM Gems book. But if it's not like pressing, if it's
Right.
not constant in your life,
Mm-hmm.
then it's sort of like
It gets lost.
being glossed over, right? And it's
Yeah.
taken over by some of the other careers that are super important as well. We certainly need, we need representation really across a lot of different industries for sure. But when it comes to STEM, we just haven't yet been able to consistently shine the light on someone that's really just like making it so cool and so interesting and so fabulous that we too, want to go down that they too want to go down that path. And I think that's what that's what I aim to do. And that's what I hope we can eventually reach a point where, we're seeing that visibility as much as we're seeing the visibility of other careers and other prominent women in those careers.
I hope we get there. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, and I really do hope that we get there, because I think it's still needed. I mean, our daughters, even though my daughter's 19 right now, but I mean, and she had me as a role model, but at the same time, there are other girls who may be, who may have an interest in STEM, who may be, as was myself, breaking up toys, trying to figure out how to put them back together, whose mother did not know what to do with me. But that's probably a girl who has an interest in STEM in some kind of way. You're right, there's no one consistently that person or that young girl can look up to and say, I want to be like her. And so I think that's really important that we still keep doing what we're doing to try to highlight as many of the stories of minority and Black women as we possibly can, so that some girl somewhere may hear this story, may see a story in your book and be like, this is my person. I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And even like hear your podcast, just have to make these things accessible to them. And because once you kind of latch on, then the key is like to keep them engaged, to keep them interested, to keep them excited, right? So that they eventually do make the decision to choose a STEM path. Because we have so many girls who are interested, but then it doesn't really convert over to like, okay, this is what I really want to do. Yeah. It's just an interest that may not, that may not be high enough on their list to be their ultimate choice. So we need to try to convert that interest and kind of keep at it, keep working at it, and show them other things and kind of build and build and build, ultimately to the point they're like, yes, this is the winner,
Yeah, I agree with that. I always say this is not a short term. We can't think about STEM as STEM for minority students as a short term endeavor. It has to be a sustained effort over time. It just does. If we want to shore up the job shortages, not the job shortages, the shortages of workers in these STEM jobs, if we want more minorities to go into these careers, we have to be intentional about the events, the program, the quality of those things, and then giving them more and more opportunities to learn, to grow, and to explore and be innovative and creative in these spaces, and give them opportunities like internships and keep it moving, so that the older they get, they're going through all of the progressions. Mm-hmm. So that when they say, hey, I'm going to college to be, a mechanical engineer, nobody's like, what? Everybody's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, or we want them ultimately to be able to say that, and that to be their number one, over some of the other options that they may also be interested in. So how do we make that option like their top option, right?
Right.
That's the challenge. It's like they may have the interest, but then it may not be their top interest. And so when it's time to choose, sometimes they end up choosing something else.
That's true.
And again, I think that, if it's not for everybody. So we're not trying to push it on anyone by any means, but at least we want to make sure they understand, and have the opportunity, have it be one of their options, and then have them make the decision that's best for them ultimately. But at least it's something that they are aware of and they've had some experience with, some exposure to, and then they can make a decision that's informed versus not having the experience, not having the exposure, and not having as an option at all because it wasn't introduced to them. So, that's kind of where I'm sitting at. It's like exposure, exposure, exposure. And then now you have now you can make an informed decision.
Correct. Because now you know, right?
Right, because now you know. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us what you have going on right now, and where can people find you?
So I had just finished my very first virtual STEM Gym summer camp. So that was really exciting. I did that in June. And so now I'm working on, plans for the next one. So if you have, and it's targeted to kind of 5th through 9th graders. So if you have like a middle schooler or a late elementary, early high school, kind of that age range, is who we're really trying to reach, because we find that, the research says that in middle schools where a lot of girls lose their interest.
Yep.
And in STEM, they have a lot more societal and peer pressures going on. And so there's a lot of factors that come to play. So really want to keep them engaged, interested in middle school. So our summer programs are focused on that target age group. So that's something that we're working on, and not only having the programs over the summer, but also having them some weekend sessions throughout the year as well.
Nice.
In terms of how you can find me, really, internet is our best friend. So you can find me on really any social media platform, LinkedIn, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as my 2 websites, stemgemsbook.com, mathsp.com. I'm always on the web in some way, shape, or form.
This is true. She's always doing something, and it's good stuff. So again, look for her on all of the social media, and it's and then her website is stemgemsbook.com and mathsp.com. Okay, so Stephanie, we always end the show asking our guests this question. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her and why?
That's a great question. And I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. And I think that I've done this to my younger self. At least I've tried to. But I remember when I was addressing a group of recent graduates, college graduates, one of my pieces of advice to them was to give yourself permission. Give yourself permission. I think that's so important because, again, like I mentioned earlier, when I was kind of being pulled in like 5, 6, 7 different directions, I had to ultimately say, okay, I appreciate all this advice. I've heard it all. I will take it all into consideration, but ultimately I'm going to do what I think is best for me because this is my life that I have to live. So I have to give myself permission to follow the path that I think is best. And it may not make sense to everybody. And that's okay because, again, it's something that if you know what's inside of you and you know that if you don't try something, then you have to live with that decision. And one of the things I've always tried to do is, again, not have any regrets. I can't say I've done that 100%, but I've tried my best in my life to not have too many regrets, and give myself permission to do something, to take some risks, right? To take some risks, to pursue some areas that may not have necessarily been, in sync with like a linear path. Maybe my path has been more parabolic or, some other form, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. So I would say that would be some advice I would give myself is like to do that even sooner, is to give myself permission. And also I think one thing I didn't do early on that I learned much later on is the importance of asking questions, asking for help. It seems so simple. Ask for help, ask questions. So simple, right? But yet so hard to do when you're young and you're, afraid of like the peer pressure you may get, or afraid of looking silly in front of your peers or your friends, or in the crowd, or the popular kids, or whatever it may be. But be your authentic self, ask questions, get help. If you don't, I promise you will miss an opportunity to gain some information that could be critical, later on. And I think that, I'm still in touch with a lot of my friends from high school. And I think that, that's something we talk about a lot, actually. It's like, man, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have sought that opportunity. I wish I would not have done this or done that. And you don't want, again, I wish I would have, I wish I could have, I wish. It's like, just do it. Try not to let other people make those decisions for you.
Right.
And try not to let people affect your path in that way. So ask questions, seek help, give yourself permission. Those are things that I still try to do today, but I definitely would tell my younger self to do the same thing.
Wow. So those are really good advice. So let me recap. Let me recap for the people in the back. Give yourself permission to figure out your own path. I think that's really important at any level of wherever you are, even if that's you right now. Then don't have any regrets. Just sort of do you, and take the time to figure it out. Then you want to ask for advice, and you want to ask the questions, because you never know, you might be missing out on something that has the potential to be life-changing for you.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, thank you to our guest today, Stephanie Espy, for just being you, man. I just really appreciate you saying yes when I asked, and for coming on the show and blowing this out of the water. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough.
Well, thank you so much as well for everything that you're doing, for having this podcast. All of your work and efforts are definitely needed as well. So again, I think we are in this together. I totally respect what you're doing, and I think that we need each other to help drive the changes that we want to see, and that we hope that will happen in our lifetime.
Yeah. Yes. So anytime you need me for anything, I'm here. I'm just a phone call away or an email away. All right, so you guys, this concludes this episode of Stemming in Stilettos. I hope you guys have learned just a little bit. She dropped a lot of nuggets in this one, so at least pick up one. And until we see you again, you guys be safe and be well.